Week 4, Chapter 6, Principles of Design. Composition is the organization of visual elements to effect a desired aesthetic in a work of art. Artists will use different techniques and strategies to make an artwork visually appealing and to direct the methods in which the viewer will interact with an artwork. In other words, composition is the whole of an object, but there are elements in that object or that work of art. There are elements in that work of art that the artist uses to tie it all together. There are different strategies for creating compositions that are interesting to us. In this section, we'll be talking about unity and variety, focal point, principles of balance, rhythm, and scale. What ties all of these photographs together? Well, I can see that the photographs are all framed and they're all of the same size, and they're hung in a grid pattern. The grid pattern is creating unity in the artwork, really holding it together. Conceptually, hopefully you can tell, but these are all photographs of volcanoes or dead volcanoes. Maybe they're not dead. I don't know. But they're all photographs of volcanoes. So conceptually, they're tied together because they're volcanoes. But the unity is really achieved because all of the images are the same format, the same size, and they're hung in a grid. What is the focal point of this photograph? And why do you think that is? My eyes are drawn to this guy here. I'm drawn to him because he's wearing the whitest shirt in the entire photograph. Also, he is dead in the center. Because the shirt is so white, you don't see that, maybe a little bit on this woman's shirt, but you don't really see the same whiteness anywhere else. And it seems to be dark around the edges and then come to this guy in the middle where he stands alone as being the person with the whitest shirt. He's just the lightest. He's a different value than everyone else. Again, talking about unity, I believe this image to be unified because of the technique of using the lines, creating a web. All of these birds in this image have lines that go off to all the other birds. And that creates a web that I do find, quite interesting, but also just ties them all together. Unity and variety. Unity, oneness or wholeness within a composition. Unity in artwork may be visual or conceptual. When a composition or an artwork is unified, one or more design elements bring the artwork together as a whole. So the artist is doing something to bring the artwork together to create unity. Variety is variety. Variety is often included within a unified composition to add visual interest. I argue that this painting or collage is unified because of the treatment of the objects. It's mostly blue. Each rectangle or square is all of a certain size. There's this sort of pseudo grid happening. It is unified. However, variety is in it. Variety makes it interesting. Think back to our color wheel. What is the opposite of blue on the color wheel, or what is the complement of blue? Blue is on one side, and it's directly opposite of orange. Orange adds contrast of color. It clashes. This adds variety. The fact that there is more black at the top than at the bottom, that is more variety. Unity and variety within unity can be achieved through many means. Artists may utilize the grid, color harmony, analogous colors, complementary colors, etc., recurring elements, conceptual unity. In this painting, we have unity because it is, I wouldn't describe this as a grid, but I would describe it as concentric circles. Like a dartboard almost. But each rectangle is about the same size. So it's really unified. Maybe it's a grid, but it's like a round grid, you know? There are recurring elements in this artwork. Each grid has a similar shape inside of it, each block. So we have black oval, we have another colored oval. Many of the ovals have colors inside them. Many of the grids or the squares are a different color than the ovals. That's all variety, but because of the way it's organized and because of the basic elements of the oval inside a grid, inside a squarish shape that's all about the same size, that is unified. Some works focus heavily on unity. Works of art that tend toward unity often emphasize order and harmony. This is a drawing by an artist named Beverly Buchanan. And Beverly Buchanan is something called an outsider artist, meaning the technical definition of the term outsider artist is that she has no formal art education, but often with outsider artists, There's a reason why they don't have a formal art education, and that might be a physical or a mental disability. This artist is one of those outsider artists with uh, a mental disability, but there is a huge market for outsider artists and including folk art as well, and she is one of them. I would argue that this drawing is unified because we have four of the same houses in a row. The flowers, you see daffodils that are going across the top, all in the same places where you'd expect. Again, unity, and unity is emphasized in this drawing. Variety, again, is when artists highlight variety. Variety is variety. So when artists highlight variety, they exaggerate differences rather than similarities. Variety can result in an emphasis on individuality and diversity. So here we have a subway car. I would say emphasizes variety to an extent. We have a musician. We have blue collar guy, like the guy that works with his hands. We've got a banker type. We have a woman keeping to herself, and these women keeping to themselves. And we have, I guess, just one black man on this subway car. We even have a sleeping guy in the back. He might be homeless. This is an example of variety and using variety to emphasize a sense of diversity in this environment. Back to the same artist, Olafur Eliasson, who photographed volcanoes. These are all craggy little islands or rocks jutting up out of the water. He's using a grid. The grid, again, creates unity. I find this grid interesting because it's all the same width, and predictably, the frames get a little bigger, 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 all the way down. All of these islands, what he's calling islands, are about the same height. All of these are about the same height, all the way up. But he's using the grid to create unity. Color harmony creates unity. Color has the ability to create an environment or even suggest a correlation between objects. This is a Chicago artist, a woman who's now in her 90s, Barbara Caston. Anyway, she's a photographer, and what you're looking at is a photograph. In her photographs, she uses light in particular to create, lots of colors, lots of interesting lighting. So what are the colors we have here? We have a purpley violet, we have a greenish blue, and we have a golden yellow. So what's significant about purple and green and blue? Well, purple and green and blue all tend to be cooler colors. So this feels like a cool environment, except for the yellow, which is a warm color. What is the significance of yellow as opposed to the purple, green, and blue? Well, yellow is the opposite on the color wheel. It is complementary color to purple. So because it's in such a purplish environment, it really jumps out at the viewer. Anyway, the environment that this photograph was taken in has harmony because the colors, especially the purple, green, and blue, work together in this analogous way. They are all analogous to blue and they are all cool colors. Recurring elements create unity. Objects, figures, shapes, lines, curves are all elements that may be used in multiples as recurring objects. This is true for paintings as it is for sculptures. What we're looking at right now is a woman taking a selfie inside a sculpture, and this sculpture has a glass, a mirror floor, and 4 mirror walls and a mirror ceiling. And then is creating a room that she stepped inside. So inside this mirror room, there are these lanterns or these little lights that are floating. And because of the infinite reflection, because of all the mirrored walls, you have recurring elements. You have these lights appearing to be everywhere. This is by a very famous artist, Yayoi Kusama, another elderly woman, but she is really hot right now. She's maybe about 90 years old, but she's really hot, and her art is in and around Chicago and the world, really. She lives in Japan. But this environment is really unified because of the recurring elements of the lights. Conceptual unity. Remember when I talked about the photographs of the volcanoes and of the islands? They're unified conceptually, as well as being hung and displayed in a grid. This is an interesting book by an artist, Ed Ruscha, where he photographed every building on Sunset Strip. He just walked, took a snapshot. So what is that? I don't know, at least a mile, 2 miles. He photographed every building and then placed the photographs next to each other. The buildings don't look the same. The photographs are all close to being the same format. But really what sticks them together, what unifies them, is the concept. He wanted to go from start to end of Sunset Strip and photograph every building along the way. It is unified conceptually. Focal point. Some features of a work normally capture the eye of the viewer. Artists will use different principles of design to create focal points that will direct the viewer's attention. Focal points are used to emphasize features within an artwork. An artist will create focal points by accentuating shapes, intensifying color, using directional line, strategically placing objects and images, isolating an object or subject. I'm sure there are other methods, but these are the methods we'll speak about. Accentuating shapes. What we're looking at is a giant sculpture. I was actually lucky enough to see this in person in New York City. It's now, I believe, been destroyed, but it was a sculpture made out of cast sugar. Anyway, what is the focal point of this sculpture? Well, this artist, Kara Walker, she's a black artist. She makes a lot of art about race and identity, and she makes and in her art, she's often really bringing up stereotypes and image, and especially stereotypes and image of the black person or the black woman. So we see a stereotype of large lips, the hat, breasts. I think that Kara Walker was being very. Um, it seems like a joke, but it's not a joke. She was really attempting to emphasize some of these elements very much. So by accentuating the shapes, the size of the breasts, and the mouth and the nose, she's really bringing an emphasis or selecting focal points for people to look at. So for people to really think about what are these stereotypes. So I would say the focal points of this sculpture, at least from the front side, are in the face and in the breasts. This is the back side. And I would say it is, again, by no joke, that the butt is so large on this figure. Again, accentuating shapes. If you were to look at this sculpture all the way around, it would have multiple focal points. And these focal points are in the accentuating shapes. Emphasis on focal point with intensifying color. What is the focal point of this painting? This is a large painting. I don't have the dimensions on this, but it is larger than your living room for sure. Anyway, with so much painting to look at, where is the focal point? I would say the focal point is right around here. This person grabbing the apple, and maybe through here. We have low saturation colors on the left and low saturation colors on the right, and high saturation in the middle. The only place in the entire painting with high saturation, and it's this person here. Because it's the only place in the painting that is has mostly low saturation. It really draws your eyes to the person, and that person truly is the focal point of the painting. Another method of creating a focal point is by using directional line. Where is the focal point of this painting, and why do you think that is? I think this painting is the face of this baby. And that is by following the lines there and here that are pointing at the baby. You can also follow a line here and here that point at the baby's face. Where is this baby looking? There is a psychological line happening. Do you remember psychological line? Lines that we create because our brains force us to create them. The baby is looking up this direction, maybe into the face of this guy who is looking back at the baby. So that's another line. Now the mother is looking off that way, but again, often there is variety in unified paintings to create interest. But the vast majority of lines, look at the oars, they're all coming to the same place. This baby's face truly is the focal point. Strategically placed objects and images. What is the focal point of this painting? There's a lot going on in this, well, not a ton going on in this painting, but there are things that you can look at, things you can argue. My argument for this painting is that the focal point is, I don't know, I'm torn between this, the face of this woman, but also this large glass of liquor. I think that is probably split between the two, truly. Why would this glass be part of the focal point? Well, she's obviously blitzed out of her mind. She's super drunk. This is a very tall glass of what's called absinthe. Have you heard of absinthe? It's a liquor that for a long time was actually illegal in the United States. I've had absinthe. It is now legal in the United States, but usually you're drinking it, I don't know, 2 ounces at a time in a shot glass. The original absinthe, you would be on the floor if you drank that much absinthe. And this is obviously not her first glass. So I believe the artist is making a joke. Also, the absinthe is original absinthe. This is why it was illegal in the United States, is because it's made with hallucinogenic wood called wormwood, which is somehow used in the process. And not only do you get drunk, but you start to hallucinate. The legal absinthe now in the United States doesn't have the hallucinogenic quality to it. But anyway, this woman would be out of her mind. I think that the artist is really bringing attention to this relationship, and that's the focal point. What is the focal point of this painting? Think about isolating an object. Well, it seems to me that this woman in the bottom right corner, maybe this boy in his face, but probably I'm looking more at this woman here. Why? It's because she is not part of the group. In fact, we have maybe that girl, so maybe 4 people looking at that woman, and she is off to the side. Because of her isolation, she is the focal point, or a focal point in this painting. What is the focal point of this photograph? Well, I think the focal point is this poor soul here and his folder. All of the paper flying through the air is coming from this folder. Using directional line, we're finding this to be the focal point. How about the focal point of this painting? Side note, sometimes artworks have multiple focal points. Remember that. Consider the accentuating shapes in the large sugar sculpture. Well, I think that this woman's face is very intriguing. But what's more intriguing is what's left of this man's head that's in her hands. I would not have typically seen this head if it wasn't for starting at the face and working down the body, pointing at the head. I might have started here, but my attention is at that creepy head down there. Principles of balance. Balance, the distribution of weight, mass, or other elements of a work of art. Actual balance. The piece of art is literally balanced. It can stand upright on its own. Pictorial balance refers to the distribution of the apparent or visual weight of elements of two-dimensional artworks. So actual balance is, again, in the real world. How is your apple balancing on top of, I don't know, your Coke bottle, your Coca-Cola? That's like actual physical balance. Pictorial balance, objects don't have to be balanced in the picture. In fact, when you talk about pictorial balance, you're talking about how the artwork is organized. One of the definitions for balance is symmetrical balance. So symmetry, a similarity of form or arrangement on either side of a dividing line or plane. For symmetrical balance in an artwork, the objects don't have to be on either side, don't have to be actually symmetrical. They don't have to be, there doesn't have to be actual symmetry. We're just describing how the artwork is put together. Looking at this painting or at this photograph, I would say this has a symmetry to it. Bilateral symmetry is where everything on a composition to either side of an actual or imaginary line is the same. So bilateral symmetry is when things are actually the same between the left and the right side. But symmetrical balance is a perception that the whole of the work is symmetrical. So it doesn't have to have bilateral symmetry. I would say that this photograph has symmetry, but it also has a symmetrical balance because the dog's head is not the same on both sides. You don't have the same amount of dog showing, but it is balanced because it's very similar on the left to what it is on the right. Asymmetrical balance is when the variations to the right and left side of a composition are similar, not the same. Yet as a whole, the artwork presents an overall sense of balance. Well, let's think about, instead of the left and right, let's think about the top and the bottom of this artwork. Here we have a heavy magnet on top of a television screen. Is this asymmetrically balanced or symmetrically balanced? I would say that visually it is asymmetrically balanced. The TV is so much larger and probably even heavier than that magnet. It's asymmetrical. Horizontal balance is when elements on the left and the right sides of a composition are perceived to be about equal. It's balanced. It's not symmetry. We're not talking about symmetry. We're just talking about balance. This is a painting that is pushed up to a door frame and a door and a radiator, and there's a telephone that's actually hanging on the painting. These are all connected and they're all one work of art. This is a good example of horizontal balance because on the left side and on the right side, this figure is in this line here. It's about the same as this area here. It doesn't have to be the same, but if you look at this as a whole, the left side is about balanced with the same size as the right side. This is horizontal balance. Horizontal balance is left and right. And you might find this confusing because there is a dividing line that goes up and down, but because it is balanced on the left and on the right, that is horizontal balance. As opposed to vertical balance. In this instance, the image is balanced. We have something on the top and we have something on the bottom. They are vertical of each other, but it has a left and right sort of balancing point. So this is vertical balance because they're balanced on top of each other. Diagonal balance. Diagonal balance is when elements are balanced diagonally within an image. We have this married graffiti, couple graffiti, which is funny and weird. And we have this elderly married couple here. But looking at the image, we have a diagonal balance. Diagonal can go this way as well. Radial balance. This is an example of radial balance. The artwork doesn't have to be in a circle, but all of the elements in the artwork need to be radiating from a central area. Imagine a wagon wheel. The wagon wheel is technically balanced, and it's all radiating from a central area. Imbalance. Imbalance can create for a viewer a sense of shock and discomfort. Also, it is commonly used to capture a sense of movement. This is I think, kind of a funny photograph by an artist that I really like. His name is Martin Cressels. And he is pictured here. This is the artist. He makes art about being the biggest person you've ever met in your life. He's like 400 pounds. He's about, I don't know, 6'6", and he has this series of photographs called Tossing a Friend. And in these different photographs, you see him just lifting up smaller people and tossing them. This is imbalance because of his sheer size to her size. It just so happens that it is capturing a sense of movement. Rhythm. Rhythm, the orderly repetition or progression of elements in a work of art. Rhythm can move a viewer visually as well as emotionally. Repetitive pattern can be used to lead the eye over the landscape of the work. Rhythm is found in sound, nature, architecture, and art. What we're looking at here is a canvas that was painted white, and then the artist took a knife and cut the canvas 5 times. Imagine cutting the canvas with a really sharp knife. You're going to do straight lines, and it's going to look just like that. How do you do it? Do you do it slow and steady? Or do you slash at it? I would slash at it, and the action and these lines, they're creating a rhythm, something that you can, if you think about it, you can really feel like what is happening here. There is a rhythm. Alternating rhythm is when different elements in a work of art are repeated in a regular, predictable order. So that's similar to a pattern. But let's see, we have green and yellow, brown and white. I don't know, blue and brown, brown and white, green and yellow, brown and white, green and yellow, brown and white, blue and white, green and yellow. I'm not sure what would be next. Maybe green and yellow would be next here. But it starts to be predictable. It's like a pattern, but alternating color white, color white, color white. And then there are other patterns within that sometimes. Progressive rhythm. Well, first of all, I want to say that this photograph has a couple different rhythms going on. One of them are the parallel lines of these steps in the staircase. It's a rhythm. Objects that move in a predictable way. Rhythm in these columns. Well, a progressive rhythm is where this line is happening in a predictable way, but it's progressively doing something. In this instance, the progressive rhythm means that it's progressively, in the image, getting closer and closer together. That's progressive rhythm. You can predict that. Another instance of progressive rhythm, I love this piece, where the artists, it was a husband and wife collaboration, running fence. Took them 2 years to put this up, but it is a fence that crossed like 3 counties in California, and then it dove into the ocean. But as you look at the image of this, you see this line getting closer together. then it gets farther apart, and then closer together. But it's all progressive rhythm because you can predictably tell what's going to happen next. Scale. Scale is the relative size of an object compared to other objects of its kind, its setting, or human dimensions. So, here's a photograph of a hippopotamus. We know that because we know hippopotamus, we know it's big, but we personally know the heights of other people. And this hippo, compared to those people, we know that this hippo is huge. That is scale. There's such thing as hierarchical scale. Hierarchical scale is the use of relative size to indicate the comparative importance of the depicted objects or people. So, in this artwork, what is the most important thing? What is the most important thing in this artwork? The most important figures. That is the baby and the woman. So it's Mary and Jesus sitting on a throne. Because this whole area is larger than everything else, it is the most important. Well, what's the second most important in this hierarchy? Well, we have these folks in the front and these folks here. These are all saints. So they are second to Mary and Jesus. And then I don't know who these fellas are. They might be disciples, but I doubt it. Back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for wealthy people who would have paid the artist to make the artwork to have the artist depict them in the images. So that's probably what's happening here. That's why they're so small. They could be saints, but I doubt it. They could be disciples, but I would think the disciples would be more saintly. But anyway, we're looking at hierarchical scale. In this, I see 3 or actually 4 levels of scale. Most important, this cluster of people. Second most important, the angels seem a little smaller. Next importance. And then these people, these small people in the background, less important. That's hierarchical scale. There's also the distortion of scale. When the viewer's sense of scale is altered, the artist can create visual shock and humor. Distortion of scale can challenge the viewer to rethink the subject and historical aspects of the object. Distortion of scale. This is another funny image. It's a collage. A collage is when an artist will cut up different images and paste them together. So in this living room, you have a bodybuilder holding a Tootsie Roll Pop and a giant canned ham on a table, and I guess this bodybuilder's wife, who is scantily dressed and wearing a lampshade, I suppose. This is funny because there are things that are just out of scale. Week 4 lectures are complete. It is now time to take and submit the weekly quiz. The quiz will be on the content of both Chapter 5 and Chapter 6.